Hello, friends, and namaste. Welcome back to the sacred space with me, your host, Preetha Lal, as we spend time reading the book Eternal Values for a Changing Society by the late Srimad Swami Ranganathananda ji. As you are aware, if you're following this podcast, he was the 13th president of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission, was a scholar par excellence, a spiritual ambassador, a philosopher, and a teacher. This multi-volume treatise that I've decided to read to you through this podcast is a testament to his breadth and depth of knowledge and wisdom. In today's readings, Swami Ranganathananda begins to explore the charm of the Upanishads and the Upanishadic thought. He traces the development of Indian spirituality to ancient times and brings in the evolution of the inward thinking man as opposed to the outward thinking often found in Greek history. Swami Ranganathananda draws wonderful parallels of how ancient Greek civilization saw man as a part of a society or community and gave precedence to his socio-political identity. Indian Upanishadic thought went a step further and took the Greek dictum of man, know thyself to become a practical reality in the Indian mind. One that became the wellspring of thoughts on manifestation of man's true self, his questions on death and beyond, so on and so forth. All of this sounds best when we read the passages from the Eternal Values. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me today as I begin. The charm of the Upanishads. The Upanishads, as we have seen, reveal an age characterized by a remarkable ferment of thought and inspiration. The physical and mental climate that made possible this ferment is an interesting study. Economically, there was no pressing problem weighing on the mind of people in the India of that age. The country was vast. The population was very small. There was plenty of well-watered, fertile land available. There was unlimited economic opportunity for everyone. Much of India was then covered with forests. Even several centuries later, at the time of Buddha, in the middle of the first millennium before Christ, the population of northern India has been estimated by some authorities, like Rhys Davids, to have been only between 15 to 20 million. The vastness of the country, the fertility of its soil, copious rainfall, rolling pasture lands, and the sparseness of the population, all these betoken the presence of stable economic conditions. None need be poor except he who is lazy or physically handicapped. The Indian peasants and artisans were noted for their virtues of hard work and simple habits. We do not hear much about poverty in those days. Poverty appeared in India much later, due firstly to foreign invasions accompanied by looting of national wealth on a large scale, and secondly to insecurity arising from the first. The Indian village organization, which originated from the early Indo-Aryans, has come down to our own times, standing the test of the vicissitudes of millennia of history. The entire social milieu of Indo-Aryans was ripe with great potentialities, for that society had found leisure to think and to ask questions. The Indo-Aryans had the choice to utilize the leisure either to conquer the outer world or the inner. With their undoubted mental gifts, they could have bent their mental energies to the conquest of the world of matter and the enjoyment of its fruits. The ideological expansion of such a culture generally results in an aggressive lateral movement, political and economic, and often military. This is the normal way for all cultures rising from the material to the mental level. The products of such mental culture are the physical sciences, technology, economics, history, politics, literature, the arts, logic, grammar, speculative philosophy, conventional religion, and imperial expansion through war. The theme of this mental culture is the human in society, his growth and expansion in the world of space and time. It aims at continuous refinement of his life at the sensate level. This is illustrated not only in the history of Greco-Roman culture, but in the Chinese, the ancient West Asian, and the modern Western cultures as well. The Upanishads and Indian culture. This normal development is found happening in the case of Indian culture also. But very early in its career, it became aware of a strange new field of human experience, namely the within of nature as revealed in the human being, as revealed in his consciousness and ego sense. Even in the Rig Veda, we find the Indian mind experiencing intimations of something divine and immortal within itself. It gathered volume and power as the years rolled on until in the Upanishads it became a flood issuing in a systematic, detached, and scientific pursuit of truth in the depth of experience. The Upanishads convey to us an impression of the tremendous fascination that this new field of inquiry held for the contemporary Indian mind, and that fascination has continued to hold India's mind in thrall even to this day. The Upanishads gave a permanent orientation to the incipient Indo-Aryan culture by their emphasis on inner penetration, by their wholehearted advocacy of what the Greeks centuries later formulated in the dictum, "Man, know thyself," but at which they themselves stopped halfway. All subsequent developments of Indian culture were powerfully conditioned by this Upanishadic legacy. The stress on inward depth had one supreme consequence for Indian culture, in that all its expansive outward movements throughout history were non-aggressive. Every word of its message for people has been spoken with a blessing behind it and peace before it, as remarked so beautifully by Swami Ranganathananda himself. The essence of a culture is revealed in the type of individual in whom that culture finds its own highest excellence manifested. A culture is worldly if worldly success is what its most admired hero represents. If there is any truth in calling Indian culture spiritual, it derives from the fact that the most admired hero of the Indian people has been and is the man of God. In the words of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, pages 381 to 82 from the Eastern Religion and Western Thought, and I quote, "The ideal man of India is not the magnanimous man of Greece or the valiant knight of medieval Europe, but the free man of spirit who has attained insight into the universal source by rigid discipline and practice of disinterested virtues, who has freed himself from the prejudices of his time and place. It is India's pride that she has clung fast to this ideal and produced in every generation and in every part of the country, from the time of the rishis of the Upanishads and Buddha to Ramakrishna and Gandhi, men who strove successfully to realize this ideal." End quote. Swamiji continues. As the Greeks and others specialized in the subject of the human being in the society, India specialized in the human in depth, the human as the individual. Each has its glory and grandeur, each has its limitations, which exactly render one the complement of the other. Dealing with the special bent of the Indian mind in his lecture on the powers of the mind, Swami Vivekananda says, "This is the peculiarity of the Indian mind, that when anything interests it, it gets absorbed in it, and other things are neglected. You know how many sciences have their origin in India? Mathematics began there. You are even today counting 1, 2, 3, etc. to 0 after Sanskrit figures. And you all know that algebra also originated in India and that gravitation was known to Indians thousands of years before Newton was born. At a certain period of Indian history, this one subject of man and his mind absorbed all their interest. And it is so enticing because it seemed the easiest way to achieve their ends. Now, the Indian mind became so thoroughly persuaded that the mind could do anything and everything according to law and its powers became the greatest object of study. Charms, magic, and other powers and all that were nothing extraordinary, but a regularly taught science, just as the physical sciences they had taught before that. Such a conviction in these things came upon the race that physical sciences nearly died out. End of quote. Continuing Swamiji's text, India versus Greece. It is here, therefore, in this Upanishadic legacy that we have to seek for the essence of Indian culture. If the thought ferment of a period can become the determinant of all subsequent movements of a culture, the study of that thought ferment is the surest means to penetrate the soul of that culture. We are familiar with an almost similar phenomenon in Western history. In the 5th century before Christ, ancient Greece experienced a tremendous thought ferment for a brief period, which became the most powerful determinant of the development of Western civilization. To quote E.M. Forster, Greece hadn't science, it is true, and she had no global commitments, but she encompassed within the tiny circuit of her city-states much that affects and afflicts the modern man in his relationship to society. And because of her writers were intelligent, and because they were sensitive, she has been able to send us news on these urgent matters which is still fresh, although it is over 2,000 years old. End of quote. The concept of the human being in Western culture is derived from the ancient Greek concept of the human as essentially a member of a community. This is what one may call the political view of the human being. The Rig Veda also upheld this concept and developed it not only to social but also to cosmic proportions. There are similarities between the religious ideas of the Indo-Aryans of the Rig Veda and the ancient Greeks. Both viewed religion from a political point of view. It was non-creedal, integrative of the divine and human order, community-oriented, and frankly, this worldly. Out of this view of human being have arisen all political and social struggles to improve the lot of people and also aggressive wars and revolutions. The Greek mind did not grow beyond this view of religion. Though the Greek mystery religions rise above the political level, they were not integrated with the distinctively Greek outlook and thought, being foreign to both. Neither did the Greeks experience the urge to subject these mysteries to that rational investigation which they so diligently and passionately applied to social and political phenomenon, and in which their contributions were to become unique and lasting. What the ancient Greeks neglected became the one ruling passion of the Indo-Aryans in the Upanishads. The great sages of the Upanishads were concerned with the human in his depth, with the human above and beyond his political or social dimension. It was an inquiry that challenged not only life, but also death, and resulted in the discovery of the immortal and divine self of the human. No philosophy can achieve depth without tackling the problem of death. This was one of the major drawbacks of Greek culture. In the words of Lowes Dickinson, and I quote, "The more completely the Greek felt himself to be at home in the world, the more happily and freely he abandoned himself to the exercise of his powers, the more intensely and vividly he lived in action and in passion, the more alien, bitter, and incomprehensible did he find the phenomenon of age and death. On this problem, so far as we can judge, he received from his religion but little light and still less consolation. The music of his brief life closed with a discord unresolved. And even before reason had brought her criticism to bear upon his creed, its deficiency was forced upon him by his feeling." Thank you, friends. We will conclude here today. In the next episode, we will continue reading on the influence of the Upanishadic thought as Swami Ranganathananda explores manliness and godliness. brings in the synthesis with the Gita and where India stood in all of this. Until next time, this is your host, Preetha Lal, wishing you well. Namaste.